All right, so my name is Sagar Karmarkar, and the talk that I want to give today is around organic DevOps. And I get a lot of people looking at me with these weird looks when I say this topic, and they're like, "What do you mean? What do you mean by organic DevOps?" Well, DevOps done organically. How do you do it from within, as opposed to going off and outsourcing or getting managed services to come in and help you with doing some of the work that you need to do to be able to get the DevOps mindset into your company? So a lot of what I'm going to talk about obviously is a technical conversation, but it's more around the soft skills, right? How do you work with the people? How do you get some of that gelling within the folks to say, all the way from the top down, how does everybody get convinced on doing DevOps from within as opposed to from without? So there's my email, Twitter, and I'll have that at the end as well. I'm also available on LinkedIn to connect. Nope, doesn't like me, I guess. There we go. Just pushing the wrong button. All right, so a little bit about me. I am local. I've been here in the Katy area for almost 14 years, going on 15 years. And I've done a lot of things, especially the last 9. Worked with a lot of large companies, primarily up in the Dallas area, Fidelity, Home Depot, JCPenney. And then down here recently was with AIG and Cisco Foods. And over the course of those years, what I found in terms of many roles, but in the last 8 or 9 years, primarily in the DevOps space, with the DevOps title, which I primarily hated, and you know, for reasons that are fairly clear as you go through this, DevOps is really not a title; it's more of a mindset. Right? And how do you get that mindset and how do you start building on it? So, yes, I live in Houston, but I'm a Cowboys fan. Any Cowboys fans in here? Yeah, 1. Yes, yes. Go Cowboys. Right, absolutely. My favorite player is Roger Staubach. So, sorry guys, but that dates me as well. So, as you guys can tell, I've been around the block, as it says there, in terms of 25 years. So, the big problem that folks have in a lot of places that I've been, and primarily in large organizations. Most of my career I've spent in very, very large organizations. How large? Well, there are multiple CTOs reporting to some technology group that then reports to the CEO, right? The org chart goes, you know, laterally as well as vertically all the way down. So a lot of people, what ends up happening in terms of the divide is you've got development and you've got operations, and you've got that whole wall of confusion, wall of whatever you want to call it, in terms of how do you break that down? Well, I'm using a different sort of paradigm here. I'm going to call it the whole, right? Anybody see Tiger Woods win the Masters? All right, we do. We got a couple of it. So you guys probably heard when he was making all those putts, right? Get in the hole, right? Well, who's in the hole when it comes to that little cave or the divide between dev and ops? Well, you've got all these groups in there. And the challenge becomes you've got to take all of those groups along with dev and ops, and you essentially have to say, all right, now how do I meld these groups into what we're trying to do? Not only do you have to convince developers on what you're trying to accomplish and the direction you're trying to go into, you also have to convince operations and the groups that are here, in the whole. Now, again, a lot of times what ends up happening is some of these groups take sides. And what I've typically found in a lot of large organizations is that you'll have architecture and QA sort of lean on the side of the development organization, whereas the rest sort of lean around the operations side, because again, when it comes to audit compliance, if you're in banking or in some sort of a government organization, you've got regulatory requirements. Even elsewhere, you probably have regulatory requirements as well. So with that said, all of those groups, and of course change management, right? If you're not fully agile, as a lot of companies are not, right? And you can call them all sorts of things, right? Fragile and water scrum or what have you. But a lot of folks that are not, you still have to deal with change management. And so a lot of times what happens is these groups end up sort of siding with or reporting to the operations, or aligning with, rather, the operations group. Now, the question then becomes, well, where does DevOps fit into all this? And I have a slide that addresses that. So some of the influences, right? And many of you guys talked about it in the morning. Donovan, we heard Donovan speak, and folks specifically around Kubernetes. There's a lot of new tools and techniques that are coming up. But primarily, it sort of focuses around, you've got the public cloud, you've got infrastructure, and you have a plethora of architectures that are out there in terms of providing that influence over the last 10 years or so. So you've got a lot of folks who are trying to go to that new shiny object, but you still, in larger companies, have legacy to deal with, right? You also have a lot of sort of management changes, right? Whether it's lean or agile, and I'm sure you guys have all heard of it, right? Some companies, how many of you here are in a company that's trying to go agile? All right, couple. How many of you are here in a company that has gone the route of safe or less? No one? Okay. Scaled, trying to do agile in a scaled manner then becomes a completely different challenge. And then you have a lot of folks really focused on how do we focus on that? And then they look at this DevOps thing and definitely don't understand it. You say it's a mindset, but we have to learn this mindset. Now, what's different between the DevOps mindset and the Agile mindset? And a lot of, where do you reach that balance, right? Where do you reach the balance to say, here's where we can merge the two? Again, we're talking about two different walls. Agile really focuses on the wall between business and development. DevOps, or the DevOps sort of mindset, focuses on how do we address the wall between dev and ops, right? So, couple of things about this slide, and again, I know the bottom line might be a little bit controversial, but hear me out on this one, right? So, especially when it comes to Agile, right? So I talked to a consultant, as a friend of mine, this is about a year ago, and I said, okay, so you're doing Agile at this company, you're trying to get them to transform into becoming Agile. They were doing safe, and I said, all right, who are you talking to? And he said, we're talking to the CTO and one level below the CTO. I said, all right, CTO and one level below. And how much have you asked them to spend so far? Well, so far we've asked them to spend $5 million. Eventually they're going to have to spend $20 million. I said, really? $20 million to transform a large organization to Agile? He said, yeah. Okay, does the CTO know that he's going to get a bill for $20 million? And the answer was, no, he doesn't. Okay, well, how are you going to have that conversation? Where are you going to go down that path? And he said, well, we'll eventually get there. We first talk to one VP, then we talk to another VP, and then we get our business going. We prove out the concept, and then, slowly 5 million becomes 10 million, 15, 20, and so on. I said, okay, great. Now, flip that. You have a software engineer, a couple of software engineers, and I have real examples in JCPenney or in Home Depot where we actually, as a team, went to our organization and said, all right, I've got a tool. It's called Sonar Cube. And I want to see some of the static code analysis for my code, which is in Git. Can I use that tool? How much does it cost? $50,000. Nope, sorry, we don't have the budget for it. So that's where really that imbalance lies. Again, the mindset, because Agile is coming from a different area, right? They're sort of focusing on different people to talk to. And what I want to do is I want to show you guys sort of the steps that I have learned over the last 5, 6, 10 years during the course of this talk today is to show you those steps to say, all right, as engineers, as the folks that you are here, how do you start to at least focus on how do I get this conversation started, both with the folks from the top as well as how do I work with some folks at my level and maybe a level above where I am to be able to implement true DevOps and really get that yes when it says, hey, we want to implement some tools, can we have the money to do it? And they'll turn around and say yes. So going backwards. Nice quote. Actually, at the end of that, the previous slide, there was a quote that says most CEOs don't know DevOps. And for some of you who, I don't know if all of you have attended or not, but if you did not attend, I urge you to look at the talk that was given by, it was actually a fireside chat last year in October at the DevOps Enterprise Summit. And it was a fireside chat between Gene Kim and the CEO of CompuWare, a gentleman by the name of Christopher O'Malley. It's about half an hour on YouTube, and really urge you to look at it. That CEO gets it, right? That's Christopher O'Malley, even though he is the CEO of a mainframe organization and a company that actually makes mainframe software for the mainframe, they get it. They basically told their staff, we're doing Agile and DevOps, even though we know that most of the people here don't know what Agile and DevOps is because they were in the mainframe world for the last 20, 30 years, right? So I'd urge you to look at that because it's that. And that sentence from a CTO who I was able to meet not too long ago, he made that statement and he said, it ultimately comes down to what are the problems that people have? And do you know, are you listening to some of the problems that people have? Because if you are, that's when DevOps can succeed. That's the only time that you're really going to get any success is when you're really listening to, all right, tell me the problems. Not just hearing what they're saying, but listening to them and figuring out, all right, if a task, like for example, deploying software to production takes 5 hours, well, why does it take 5 hours? How can we get that to reduce down to, say, maybe a half an hour? And even better, right? So those are the kinds of things that when you listen to where the time goes, especially with folks that are in the a little bit senior most developers or even your operations engineers, they're going to be able to tell you that. And there was a lot of times when I was at a position of senior manager or director where my team would come to me and say, hey, we have this problem. Who's listening to us? Who's really, when we get, and it would be me most of the times, right? Going up to senior management, trying to convince them to say, look, we know we have a problem. We know we can fix it. We just need some support. So how do you get that support? How do you build a little bit from the ground level to be able to get that support? Now, capabilities-wise, on the left, I think everybody would agree that those are, those are primarily the capabilities that you would want to do to sort of implement when it comes to DevOps, right? Now you can go in detail into every single one of them, right? Continuous integration has its own set of tools and processes. Continuous validation has its own set of tools and processes, as well as delivery, infrastructure as code and monitoring. So one question I get asked a lot is, okay, we know where dev is, we know where ops is, we know where the teams in the whole, primarily belong. Where does DevOps belong, right? And again, a lot of what's on this slide is a little bit of comments that I've received, things that I see out, see out in companies. That they have looked at and really are trying to solve. But one of the things that Mary Poppendijk not too long ago was here in Houston, I believe it was last year, and she made a statement that full stack engineers really own a lot of, or should own, a lot of the development that goes on within teams. And I said, okay, great. So all full stack engineers on a team, and you have Agile teams, maybe 5, 10, 15, and then you start, so who does DevOps? Well, you can do DevOps. What it will probably require is somebody who already has full stack knowledge, as well as some development and operations experience, as well as some people with experience from the whole, as I had mentioned, right? Architectural experience, QA experience. Now, honestly, do you know people that have all of that experience? Probably, but they're few and far between. And they're probably very expensive in terms of trying to get them hired, right? They don't grow on trees. You don't have people that are available for you to be able to populate multiple teams. So how do you sort of put together a mindset to say, all right, I'm going to grow the people that I have, give them, or give them or allow them to sort of get the DevOps mindset, understand what's going to be required going forward to be able to deliver quickly and effectively, and then move forward from there to say, all right, now that I have some people convinced, how do I convince more and more folks? And how do I get the message upwards, right? Because that really is the key. Now, there's two ways to do this, right? Your CTO, CEO, CIO will go to a conference, hear about DevOps, and again, this actually happened 3-4 years ago, right? Where CEOs would come back and go, we need to do DevOps. Okay, well, let's go implement a CI/CD pipeline. Yes, we're doing DevOps now. What do you have? You have a CI/CD pipeline. That's half the story, because you're still not deploying into production as quick as you want to. Well, why not? Well, because of the groups in the whole, right? You still have to have architectural approval for a lot of these things. Testing still has to complete some of the work that they need to do. Change management has a window of 2 weeks. We can't move that date, right? Just because we're Agile doesn't mean change management has already become Agile either, right? So you've got all these problems that you still have to bring everybody along with, and sort of get that into sort of the psyche and the culture of the organization to say, how do I get folks to understand? So you could do something from a directive approach, right? CEO or CTO says, we need to do this. You could do it from within. How many are you guys working in dojos today? Anybody here actively working in dojos? So Target came out several years ago with the concept of a dojo, which is sort of spend a limited amount of time, 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe, within a restricted area. You have all the tools that you need. You learn the mindset, similar to Agile camps, as a lot of companies have gone towards. You would have DevOps Dojos, and you'd have a specific goal in mind. You spend 2, 3, 4 weeks in that dojo, and you get the work done and be able to move forward. Those are great if you have, the sort of skill set to set up the dojo and to go forward. Maybe with some funding, because that does take some dedicated funding to be able to set up. So you could do it from bottom up. You can do it from top down. Top down, more directive approach. Bottom up, that's where the knowledge is, right? All your knowledge is really with the engineers that actually do the work. The text in the middle is actually taken from Leading the Transformation, a book by Gary Groover. If you have not read it, it's a really quick read. Good for executives. I'd recommend that. I also have a list of references at the end that I refer to on a regular basis. But yeah, essentially, yes, you can do both. It would be better, however, to do it from within, and we can go through some steps. So why do it organically, right? It's a pretty simple read, and I'll let you guys look at that. But again, it comes down to your engineers are the folks that know the work. They've been doing it. What you have to do as leaders and managers and as senior DevOps folks or senior engineers that are doing work, is how do I get work off of their plate so they can focus on what really needs to be done as opposed to all the other stuff, right? That becomes the key. And if you have teams like Agile teams or even teams that are starting to push the envelope, and you want that. You want teams to be able to say, all right, I need these tools to be able to deliver software quickly. Let them pick their own tools. Let them pick their own talent, right? If they know somebody that they've worked with, that they want to be able to continue to work with, let them go do that, right? But then that also requires conversation. So where do we start, right? With all of this, where do we start? Well, DevOps in the organization, recommend starting centralized first. Again, a lot of debate on this, and I'm happy to discuss with anybody. What I have found over the years that I've been sort of, and again, Fidelity is where Fidelity Investments back in 2011 is where I started with this particular approach on the left, is that centralized approach. And then we eventually found that you would merge it towards the decentralized, where you'd have people branch off into the teams, whether they were operations focused or development focused. And you'd branch them off. You'd still have collaboration within the DevOps folks, but it was really more of you start with centralized, move over. DevOps has to be a shared service. If DevOps can be a shared service and a recognized shared service, similar to the way architecture is, or similar to the way change and release management is in most organizations, that's going to be the key, and that's where you're really going to get successful. So, step one, right? Start with assessments. A lot of companies out there, the one big one last couple of years is DORA, DevOps Research and Assessment. Dr. Forsgren, Jez Umbel, Gene Kim have actually come out with a survey that they've been doing for the last 5 years now, and they've developed on it, they've improved on it with research, with analytics, and they have their own assessment. Worked with a company not too long ago, and we got the costs on that, and it comes out to be in the tens of thousands. So if your company has tens of thousands to do an assessment through DORA, you certainly can. What I would recommend, though, is there's a book called Accelerate, which I also show in the references. Accelerate actually has a list of 24 capabilities divided into 5 groups. You can take those and literally put together your own survey. And that's what we did in the last couple of places that it was at, to put together that survey to say, and not really a survey, and I'm calling it a survey, I shouldn't. It was more of here are the set of questions we need addressed from teams. How do we get those addressed? Now, we had one-on-one sessions with teams. We went to their stand-ups. We did all sorts of things to get those answers. But what we really tried to do is get them objectively, right? If there are tools out there like dashboards, for example, if you already have a dashboard, let's go get that information about how many builds you're doing, what tests are you running, how many deploys have you done, right? Let's get all of that directly fed in to some of the assessment work that we're doing. Again, why do you want to do this assessment? You want to be able to have the conversation, right, eventually with your senior management, senior leaders, to say, this is all the work that I see happening in the various teams. Now, it could be your division, it could be beyond your division, all the way up through the chain, but you can get an assessment done and try to repeat that every 3 to 6 months, because you've got new people coming in, you've got newer ideas, things may have changed within the team based on some of the work that's already been done. You'll want to be able to maintain this on a quarter-to-quarter basis so that you can get that feedback, and that becomes your feedback loop to be able to measure, A, where did you start, and B, where are you today, right, in your overall overall march towards getting the DevOps mindset. Roadmaps, right? So if you're doing Agile, in Agile, you already have, a lot of you are probably doing PIs, so PI roadmaps are there. If you've got a solution train where large organization where multiple Agile release trains are colliding, then you probably have a solution train. And with that, you have a solution board that will become your roadmap in terms of where am I now, and where am I going to be in 1 PI, 2 PIs, 3 PIs. But if you're not doing Agile, right, you still want to have a quarter by quarter roadmap of where things are moving, right? Where are we going? We've got something done now. We want to get to a certain point. Here's a roadmap. Business and technology, primarily technology, really has to sign off on this. Depending upon who your stakeholders are in terms of the sign-off process, you'll want to get approval here. And this is where the conversation would start. So you've got the assessments done. You have data to look at. Now's your time to go put the roadmap together to say, all right, here's now how we're going to proceed or going forward down this DevOps path. Now, the third aspect, I mentioned two, right? So you've got A for assessments, R for roadmap. The last one is actually 3 T's, right? Tools. You guys have seen this slide, and definitely don't want to bore you with those. But these are the groups of tools. And you talk to managers. Anyone here knows, and most of you probably receive them, right? Tool companies are literally bombarding folks with information about their tools, right? Hey, I heard you're doing something in this space. Here's a tool that can help you, et cetera, et cetera. And so the emails can go up to several tens to maybe several hundreds in a course of a week. These are the tools. Now the question becomes, which tool is right for us? You probably already have a tool, given that you've already been developing software within the organization. So you have a tool or set of tools for various things, for continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous validation, etc. You have tools to do that. So the question becomes, how do you choose the right ones, right? Is there a reason for you to make a change at this point, right? Do you want to move down the path of, okay, I now am looking at a different architecture that I'm trying to implement, and therefore I want to figure out what tools are the best kinds of tools. So with that, training and talent, I am proposing a model of RHO, recruiting, hiring, and onboarding. And then for talent, in terms of how do you get people onboarded, how do you train folks that are already in staff from a recruiting perspective, how do you hire them, how do you onboard them, and sort of give them what you're doing around DevOps. And then training, there are a couple of places out there today that do some coaching and training. There's some examples that I have in here of specific companies, whether it's retail or financial services or insurance, that I have worked with, just to give you an idea. And again, final thoughts. Shared services, a couple of references. The materials should be available for you guys, so certainly have at it. If you do have any questions, please feel free to hook up with me on email, LinkedIn as well, and I am on Twitter. This, by the way, is my company. I'm going to be joining a consulting company next week, but that is my company that I'd started up about 1.5 years ago. So feel free to reach me on that channel. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great conference.